I have a good open rate, but my calls to action don't generate donations. What can I do differently to change this?
So she sends out emails. Her emails get a good open rate,
Right.
but then in the email, her donate button, I guess, at the bottom of the email is not getting a lot of click through.
Correct.
One thing that I would suggest is try switching it up. Instead of asking for a donation, right, in the call to action, maybe make it, click to find out more or read more, and then maybe link them to a page on your website, that's got the donate button and has a way to donate, but also maybe has a little bit more information. I think sometimes we jump the gun when asking for a donation. We assume that this email list is all is all very bought into to the mission of my organization, and a lot of times my email list is going to include certainly those people who are volunteering, who are involved on a regular basis, but it's also going to include people who participated in one volunteer event 2 years ago and happen to still be on your email list because of that. So a lot of donors are going to need a little bit more stewardship and a little bit more hand-holding before they're actually ready to give. And so I would say if you're not getting a good click-through rate on your actual donate now button on an email, just try switching it up for 1 or 2 emails and say, instead of donate now, maybe make it say find out more, right, or find out how you can help, right, so that it's not saying right from there the call to action is donate now, but maybe it's find out how I can help, or get involved, right? And get involved certainly may, at the end of the day, mean a donation in a particular case. But if I click get involved, I don't necessarily feel like, okay, the very next screen I'm facing is the place to put my credit card in, right? Get involved, it might be another page where I'm seeing more impact and more positive things that the organization is doing, and then there's the ability to donate from there.
The next set of questions, Amy Keller has 2, so feel free, Amy, to ask both of them. I've unmuted you now. Can you hear us, Amy?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, Amy.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, I got you just fine. What's up?
Okay, good. Well, I wrote them in. I was curious if there are rules of thumb regarding how many times per week, per month we communicate, in what format, just kind of rules of thumb. And my other curiosity, you guys already touched on this a little bit, is how much do people actually read when we send any, whether it's with pictures and an infograph, how much should we expect people will read whatever email we send them?
Sure. Well, let's talk about that second piece first, right? Because we touched on this a little bit, is that most people, when they get an email, they're going to skim it for if they do open it, right? This isn't even saying that they're going to open it, but if they do open it, they're typically skimming it for the things that are that their eyes are immediately drawn to. And what is my eye immediately drawn to? And I don't have the power presenter here, but what is my eye typically immediately drawn to when I open up an email? It's the images, it's the things that are in bold, and it's any buttons that are on the email. So one way to really be sure that you're capturing somebody's attention and that they actually take the time. People are lazy. They don't want to read the email that you're sending. They don't want to read any of the emails that they're getting. So one of the things that you need to make sure that you do is have those particular things that are going to draw the eye first be the things that are causing interest in actually looking into the rest of the email. So that's like one of the things where I was saying to the previous question is, instead of having your button say donate now and changing that to find out how I can help or get involved, right? Well, now it's something that yes, I know what the next step is, but I don't know that it's just asking for a donation, right? And so, it may pique my interest a little bit more by having that be a bit more vague, right? And so certainly, you definitely want to pique the person's curiosity with the subject line and with the content. But one of the best ways to do that is just to make the very first big bold statement on your email, a teaser for what the actual content holds. As another rule of thumb, I would say don't ever make any individual content piece in an email longer than a few sentences, right? Tell them what you're going to tell them, and then link them to read more somewhere else, right? So don't try to share a 5-paragraph blog post in an email. Put the first few sentences of the blog post and then say, read more here. And then they're on your website, and now they have the ability to click around and learn more about your organization, but you're not asking them to, read a whole article from their cell phone, which they're probably using to open that email that you sent.
Okay, a competency question. This has been our experience anyway. Our experience, some of us have varied backgrounds. We generally don't tend to be graphic artists or people that necessarily have expertise in designing layout for these emails. And you don't want to have the newsletter look always the same. So, I think there's a interesting issue that we have about what competencies. There's people who are the writers. It used to be the writers, then they'd send it to the graphic design people, and
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think is one of the best ways to do that efficiently in a nonprofit that doesn't necessarily have graphic artists on the sideline that know web tools?
Yeah, definitely. No, that's a great point. Well, I will say this, right? First off, content is king. So your content is always going to be the most important thing, even if you can't get a good image in there to save your life, or you don't have great graphics to share. Content is king. If you want to vary the types, and I don't know if you guys are using MailChimp or Constant Contact or what you use to send out your emails. Most of those tools are going to have a few available templates, but there's a really cool free tool called Piktochart, and I'll share a link to this. And it's a great way to create graphics and infographics without having any graphic design experience or really any technical experience. And I'll be the first to raise my hand and say, I'm a data nerd, but I'm not a web developer and I'm not a graphic artist. And I use this little tool called Piktochart. It's really easy. They've got tons of images on file that you can build out and use to insert into your email. So I'll definitely be sure to share a link to that in just a second here.
Okay.
But a great thing you can do too is share photos, right? Every nonprofit should have a database of photos that they have ready to roll that they can share in communications that go out. And it doesn't matter if it's just a photo of the outside of your building or a photo of a few staff members or a photo, ideally it's a photo of the people that are being impacted, right, by your organization. And some nonprofits are lucky enough to be, building houses in Haiti, and they can take these amazing, panoramic shots of, villages that they've built. And that are really visually appealing, whereas the National Insurance League may have a little bit more of a problem with that, with getting photos. But certainly, a way to get the visual piece of those emails in there is to have photos.
Okay.
But yeah, just a quick follow-up question, and I know we need to get to the next group here. What email tool are you using?
We use Constant Contact.
Oh, yeah. So
Blast.
Yeah, so Constant Contact, if you go into the setup when you're actually building out an email, they have multiple templates that you can use, but you can also click and drag buttons into that email. So when you want to create those calls to action, they have a great way to click and drag buttons into that email as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, follow up with me after. I put my email address in there, and I'd love to show you some emails that we've just sent out, and we've had some go really well and some not go so well, and I'd certainly be happy to talk through those with you as well.
Okay, that would be great.
Awesome, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Before we open up to the next one, we're getting people providing some feedback too. Chris Tazaler, I hope I pronounced that right, is talking about making sure that your emails are responsive. Jason, you said that certainly a lot of people might be reading emails from their phones these days. And to piggyback off what you just said, something like a button on your site, if you're making a call to action with a button, a good trick is to make sure that your button is appropriately sized for a person's finger, and that's usually around 32 pixels.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's way more people checking their cell phone or their smartphone for their email than you would think. It's actually around 70% of all email that is opened on a smartphone. So think about that, right? Do you really want to have a huge section of content and multiple calls to action when somebody is literally opening it on a screen that's 3 by, or 2 by 4 inches or 2 by 6 inches long. You really want to think about, is this image, is this graphic, is this content going to format well on a mobile device? And most email tools out there are going to have a way you can send a test email or preview it in a mobile screen. So just be sure you're testing your emails before you send them out to 5,000 people.
Precisely what I was going to say. The next questions come from Ron Zaki. Again, correct me if I'm pronouncing that wrong. Ron, can you hear us? I'm not sure if Ron has a microphone, but we will leave you unmuted, Ron, if you do have a microphone, but I'm going to read off some of your questions. Ron asks, how much does good design really impact your response?
How much does what really impact your response?
Good design.
Oh, good design. I would say definitely good design is important. But as I think we've got Ron on the line, maybe.
Yeah.
Ron, we have you there?
Hello.
Hey, man, how's it going?
I'm a bit under the weather.
Okay.
Oh, yikes.
Okay.
Well, that's okay. Don't worry about talking. We've got your question here. As I mentioned before, good content is really what's going to be the cornerstone of your email strategy. But good design is important. The nice thing is that most of the tools out there, most of the email tools out there today, make it pretty easy to send a beautiful email. Even if you're not, the previous question was, about the graphic design. Design is important, and having a good layout is important, but you certainly don't need to be creating custom images with all kinds of, special borders and custom templates. There's lots of ready-made templates out there that will do just fine. There's lots of images available out there that will do just fine, and all of the fonts on all of those tools are perfectly fine for sending out an email. Now, that being said, right, if you send out an HTML formatted email through MailChimp and all you have is a logo and then a couple of lines of text and the text is too small or too big and the call to action is in the wrong place or too small or too big, that's something that can impact it. But I would say don't worry so much about design. Worry about having those few pieces that are required, right? If you're looking at your checklist, right, have your logo, have your main subject about what the content is going to be, have your main content section, have your main call to action, and then have subsequent calls to action, subsequent content pieces, and links to your social media. As long as your email contains all of those elements, you can kind of design around that. But certainly you don't need to be any kind of expert to be able to send a good email.
And sorry to hear that you're sick, Ron. We hope you feel much better. But Ron also gives us some advice. He says that I think monthly newsletters with multiple articles are a waste of time, that he would think about breaking up those articles into weekly content to maintain better engagement.
Yeah, absolutely. It really just depends on your audience and how accustomed they are to receiving communications from you. I mean, at Commit Change, we send out only one monthly newsletter, but we also send weekly updates to all of our clients. And so I think it just depends on the list that you're using. And this is something that we really haven't gotten too much into, is that most nonprofits are going to have multiple lists, right? They're going to have one for their major donors. They're going to have one for their entire newsletter list. They're going to have one for the people who have volunteered or have an engagement score of a higher than 5, right? As per your CRM that you're using. Some donors or some supporters are not going to want more than a monthly communication from you because they're not really that involved with your organization. But somebody who volunteers on a regular basis with your organization is totally going to be fine with a weekly update. So I think it's just about knowing your audience and communicate with that audience accordingly, right? Another thing, I say the major donors list because you really want to be careful if you know that you've got that $10,000 check coming every year for the last 5 years from a major donor. Do you really want to be soliciting them for a $50 crowdfunding campaign in an email that you send out? Probably not, right? So knowing your audience and segmenting those lists out can certainly tell you whether it's appropriate to reach out once a month or once a week. But yeah, I mean, to our customers and a lot of our nonprofits, they do send weekly communications and even a few times a week to particular groups of email lists that are involved on a regular basis with the organization. So I think it just depends on the list.
The next question, I'm going to try to get through each question as quickly as possible. We have, just to give everybody an update, 28 minutes. We're going to 3:30. The next person is Chris Tazaler. Chris, can you hear us? And did I pronounce your last name right? Or how close was that?
It's Tazalar, actually.
Tazalar, okay. I'm going to get it right next time I try to pronounce it.
How's it going?
Not a problem. Well, I've actually got just a few that I've been putting out there. But I mean, what do you consider as a good open rate? And similarly, is there kind of a rate of unsubscribing that should all of a sudden be alarming to us? I mean, if we're sending out 12,000 emails and we get a couple of dozen people unsubscribing, I guess that's not so surprising to me. But what are some of those rates that are kind of standards?
Yeah, sure. An industry standard for an open rate for an email is typically around 20%. So, and that'd be for like your newsletter type email is around 20%. I'd say a great open rate would be 25 or 30%, and something that you'd have to start worrying about would be under 10 or 15% open rate. So when you're going back and viewing the reporting on whatever tool you're using, you really want each of those pieces of communication to end up at over 20% open rate. Throughout the if you're averaging them together. As far as click-through rates, they can really run the gamut depending on what the call to action is, right? A call to action that says donate now will almost certainly have a lower click-through rate than a call to action that says read more, right? Why? Because it's actually asking for a bigger action to take place. But I think an average click-through rate is probably going to be around 1.5% to 2%. We've seen click-through rates as high as 15 or 16%, depending on what the call to action is. But any click-through rate that is, and again, this depends on this is wholly contingent on what list you're sending it to and the size of your email list. A click-through rate of lower than 1%, you probably ought to look into that and see what's going on there.
I think my question was mostly about unsubscribes.
Yeah, unsubscribes. Unsubscribes aren't necessarily a bad thing, right? It really just depends on why the person is unsubscribing. And I'm assuming you guys use something like Constant Contact or MailChimp.
Blackbaud.
Oh, okay, yeah, Blackbaud. Yeah, so Blackbaud will tell you why somebody says that they've unsubscribed, right? When I go unsubscribe from an email list, typically it's going to ask me, is it because I didn't subscribe for this list? Is it because I'm no longer interested? Is it because I didn't say that it was okay for these people to email me? So when you're looking at why people unsubscribe, as long as it's not a very high rate per email. I mean, as long as it's not more than for a list of if you're saying your list is 10,000 people, as long as it's not 15 or so unsubscribes per email, I wouldn't worry too much about it as long as they're not saying that they're unsubscribing because they never gave you permission to email them.
Okay.
Unsubscribes will happen. Somebody signs up for a newsletter, they come to an event, and they move out of your service area, or they're no longer interested, or they just don't want to receive this type of email anymore. An unsubscribe definitely is not something to get alarmed about as long as they're unsubscribing for a reason that is not because they feel like you're abusing their email address.
Makes sense.
Sure. Thanks a lot.
You bet.
The next one comes from Brittany Anderson. Brittany, can you hear us? I am not sure if Brittany has a microphone, but again, we'll leave you unmuted, Brittany, but I'm going to quickly ask you a question. Why are
I'm back. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Hey, how you doing?
Wonderful. Good. How are you guys?
Doing awesome. Thanks for joining us.
Great. Yeah, definitely. Question for, we aren't getting a very good opening rate for our emails when we use Constant Contacts. Is that a lot to do with the subject line, or what are like some of the top, I know you guys have talked about this a little bit, but what are some of the top things that of why emails are not opened?
Yeah, it's 90% to do with the subject line,
Okay.
and the other 10% is a mixture of who the email is coming from and how you've formatted it to show how the email is coming from. So, for example, if I'm sending an email from jason@commitchange.com, that's going to get a higher open rate than an email from noreply@commitchange.com or
Okay.
info@commitchange.com.
Gotcha.
So be sure to check that out, right? And oftentimes I'll send emails from our CEO just because his name is more recognized,
Okay.
even though he's not actually the person sending the email, right? You know, a person's name.
It looks better.
Yeah, it looks so much
Right.
better. And also too, I think, you know, a lot of people miss the boat on this as well, is that, you know, when I send an email from info@mynonprofitsname.com or noreply@mynonprofitsname.com, you're missing the opportunity for someone that wants to reply directly to that email to communicate with your organization.
Okay. Yeah.
So I would say 90% of it is subject line, 10% is who it's coming from. And in some tools, like I know for sure that when you use Constant Contact, you can actually customize who it's coming from. And so when I send something, I send it from Jason@CommitChange, even though it's just coming from CommitChange, right? So again, it gives a little bit more context and makes it a little bit more personal to the person. But yeah, other than that, I'd say really just, you know, take a look at those subject lines and be sure that you know, the subject lines are something that's interesting. And I mean,
Okay.
you know, another thing that certainly could affect it is list quality. You know, you got to look at your email list and, you know, and know who that audience is and you know, how they want to be communicated with. So you know, that might be something too. If you're getting really dismal click-through rates, talk to some of the people who are on that email list that you've got a relationship with and ask them.
Okay.
You know,
Yeah.
a lot of times people will be more than happy to give you feedback, and then you can iterate based on that feedback if you really can't figure it out otherwise.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. Okay, wonderful. And then you guys had suggested, you know, doing, you know, a Facebook app and stuff like that in order to get people onto our email list. Is there specific apps that you guys would recommend, or is there one specific one that just Facebook uses and stuff like that?
There's one called Wildfire that's really cool. It allows people to not only sign up for the newsletter on your Facebook page, but you can also do sweepstakes and giveaways.
Okay.
And I think you can just Google Wildfire app and find it. I'm not sure what the URL is. You know, another great way to you know, if you think you're the type of nonprofit that could probably run a crowdfunding campaign, certainly, you know, crowdfunding campaigns, because they are really revolving around a particular story and trying to create an emotion, you know, elicit an emotional response from the supporter. Oftentimes, you'll get a lot of new donors, even if they're only donating $1, right? And that's kind of a sneaky strategy that you can use. Is, you know, you can run a crowdfunding campaign asking for only $1 from each person, when really what you're trying to do is get contact info for people who could potentially be interested in supporting you. So, you know, if you think about the Ice Bucket Challenge, right? The real value of that whole campaign totally was not that they raised $100 million. I mean, obviously, right? Any nonprofit here would love to have $100 million. But imagine that they've got 100 million new contacts of people who they can now solicit year after year after year with campaign after campaign after campaign. Look, next year in December, they're not going to need the Ice Bucket Challenge. They're going to send an email to that very same group saying, hey, how fun was that Ice Bucket Challenge? Can you send us $10?
Right, yeah. Okay, definitely. Okay, that sounds great.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Brady.
That's it for right now. Yeah, thank you guys.
The next set of questions comes from Beth Drucker. Give me 1 second as I look for Beth.
All right. Hey, Beth.
Beth, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Perfect.
Most of my questions have already been answered. This has been great and really helpful. But
Thank you.
we always debate what size font is best for people, and does that change whether people are reading it on their phones or laptops?
It definitely doesn't change with whether they're reading it on their phone or their laptop, right? The font size is going to be the font size. But I will say, and certainly, you know, it'll appear smaller on your phone. But I will say that, you know, a 12-point font is probably almost never a good idea. in sending an email, right? Because if you're using 12-point font, that means you're probably putting in too much content, right? I also would be careful about using a font that's too big, because if you're using a font that's too big, when I view it on the mobile device, it might cut. If let's say I'm using it for my subject, and my subject is Happy Holidays from the Giving Back Foundation, right? And if I put that in 30-point font, that's going to cut it into 3 lines on my mobile device, and it's just going to look funky. So I mean, yeah, font plays a role, but the only rule of thumb that I would say there is don't make it under 12-point font, and don't make it so big to where it's gonna be distracting from the message that you're trying to get across. So one thing that you want to think about when you're doing font size, and it's not so much about font size, it also ties in with the is you want the main information to be above the fold. And what that means above the fold is how much information on that email can I see without having to scroll down. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So make sure if you're putting images and content and stuff in there, make sure that your image isn't so big that I have to scroll down to see the subject line of what of what the main piece of the email is. Don't make it so big that I miss the big teaser that I want to get in order to even decide if it's worth it to scroll. Because even when I open that email, that doesn't mean that I've scrolled, and I can still just as easily delete it before I even scroll down and view anything else.
Yeah. Okay. That's a tough one with images, because they tend to take up a lot of space. Yeah.
Well, it's just a thought about when you're putting your logo in. Make sure your logo and that first little subject line teaser are before that first giant image of what you want to share.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
Cool.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Beth.
The next one comes from Paula Brantner. 1 second.
Cool. Hey, Paula.
It might be that
Guys,
Paula.
This is awesome, by the way. I'm totally loving this discussion. Let's keep it going.
We're getting a ton of questions. Paula is not in right now, so I can't find her name. We're going to go to somebody else. We'll swing back to Paula's question afterwards. We want to take everybody who is in the webinar first.
Yeah, guys, what the screen that Ben's got pulled up right now is the Twitter feed for the GR office hours.
Right.
If your nonprofit is not using Twitter, you're missing an opportunity to connect with potential constituents. If you do have Twitter, join the conversation and hop in here with some advice or best practices that you've got.
And I take that back. I found Paula. Her name was out of alphabetical order.
All right.
So Paula, can you hear us?
I was trying to get your attention. My question was that my organization is a social enterprise, and so most of our communications are about sales prospecting and explaining about our products as opposed to solicitations for fundraising. So my question is whether you had any different advice if you were marketing products and services as opposed to soliciting donations.
Well, being from a sales and marketing background, I will say that you don't really want to use the word sales in a subject line, because that's one of those words that'll get pinged by a spam filter. Same with the word free or giveaway or there's a lot of you can go look up like the types of words that a spam filter is more likely to catch. But your general premise is still going to be the same. You're going to want to have a call to action. You're not going to want to always be sending, if you have a newsletter list, you're not going to always want to be sending a hard ask, asking them to buy your product. You're going to want to send them information that, is relevant to your industry, so that when the time does come, they're actually clicking on the product because you've got them interested. Sales and nonprofit fundraising are both sort of similar in that it's about the long-term game, right? It's not a short-term thing. It's not a quick once and done relationship. So, be sure that when you're sending out your email communications, you're investing in cultivating that content or that contact for the long term. And so, the sales prospecting is the same way, right? The only thing that's maybe a little bit more sensitive there is you need to make absolute sure that person wants you to be emailing them. So there's nothing there, you know, and a lot of that is just where you get that contact from, right? There's nothing worse than getting an email from a list that you didn't sign up for, and that just really has a negative impact on the user experience. But yeah, I mean, as far as you know, using, you know, these best practices for sales instead of fundraising, you know, a lot of the same tactics and best practices will apply. But certainly, you know, the way that you're actually soliciting people and trying to get buy-in for your product is a whole lot different than you know, cultivating a relationship to get advocacy for your nonprofit organization.
Paul, I'm having a little bit of feedback, but I know you had a few other questions if you wanted to ask them.
No, I think that was the only question I had. I had a couple of comments on things that other participants had said, so I'm fine for now. Thank you.
Did you get
Paula, also shoot me an email. There's a social impact organization called the Social Innovation Fund, and they're awesome at email. They sell trainings to nonprofit professionals, and I'll send you their contact info so you can subscribe to their newsletter list, and you can kind of learn a little bit from them. They definitely are killing it with their email.
Did we put up a link to that the Pixograph? I forget what it was called, but
PictoChart. Yeah, let me.
Yeah.
I'll share that right now.
Yeah. And then the last current. Okay, we have a few more questions coming in. Perfect. But the next question comes from Wager Ali. Let me know if I pronounced that first name right. If I'm wrong, let me know. Can you hear us? Well, I'll leave Waker unmuted, and I'll ask the question. The question is about email frequency. I think we touched on it a little bit, but
sorry, can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Oh yeah, so we use Constant Contact, and we normally send out weekly emails. So it's kind of interesting discussion you're having. I'm getting a lot of good information. My question is about the one question is I asked about frequency. So we try our best to keep it one email per week. But if we have a fundraising dinner coming up, then we increase the frequency. So that's normally what we do. One question about the accuracy of the open rate in Constant Contact. Is it really, do they have any mechanism to really report those open rates, or is it, I'm just asking how accurate that number is.
Yeah, those numbers are 100% accurate that you get from Constant Contact. I mean, the system can tell when an email has been delivered and has been opened. So when you're looking and it says, you know, I've got a 28% open rate on the last email that I sent. I have a 1.6% click-through rate on my different calls to action, and I have I have 6 people unsubscribed. Those are 100% accurate numbers. So you know, you can definitely use those to iterate on emails that you're sending. Especially, you know, it sounds like you're sending weekly communications. You guys can really tweak and be very scientific about the way that you're sending those communications. You know, go back and look at the last 8 emails that you sent and find out which one has the best open rate and click-through rate, and build another email just like that one. And then for the next, you know, and for the next 10 emails, build them more like that one, because that one obviously was, you know, maybe it was the content, maybe it was the messaging. You know, you certainly might take a little bit of testing, but you know, if you're sending a weekly email, it's really easy to go back and look at the last 10 emails that you sent and say, okay, which one of these was the most effective and why? And let's go ahead and build our next email campaign, you know, like that one that was the most successful.
Great, thank you. I just looked, actually, our average is 33% open rate.
Oh, 33%. Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, yeah, a nonprofit a lot of times will average a higher open rate than what the national average is, because you know, a lot of times you've got your volunteers and your constituents in there as well. So yeah, 33%. Congratulations. That's looking pretty good.
Thank you. Great information. Thanks a lot, guys.
We have one more question, but before we get to that, I just want to tell Dave that the wall should be updating automatically as tweets get in. I'm not sure why it's not getting new ones. But the next question comes from Judith Smith. And we are up against the gun, so if there's any last questions after that, please get them in immediately. But Judith, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, Judith.
Hi, how are you? Thank you for the webinar. I just wanted to ask really quickly, is it ever okay to use like email addresses that came through on an email that you received? What's the proper etiquette on that?
I'd be careful about adding somebody who's been emailing back and forth with you personally to like a newsletter list. But certainly I would always ask, right? Hey, can I add you to the newsletter list?
Okay.
Is it going to be a big deal or a bad thing that you do? You know, I think that it may be more on a case-by-case basis. You know, for the business world, that's a definite no-no, right? But for you know, so like if a sales rep is building a relationship with a prospect, and then they add that prospect to the newsletter list without asking if they can, you know, I would definitely advise against that. For the nonprofit world, I think it may be a bit more on a case-by-case basis. But remember, if that person unsubscribes and they report it as abuse or report it that they didn't sign up for that list, that's going to affect your spam score, which is going to make it less likely that any of your emails get into any of your users' inboxes. So you know, just keep that in mind as you're building out that email list. A nice thing you can always do is in the footer of your email, you know, put a link to sign up for our newsletter list.
Okay.
Like in the footer of every email that I send, you know, I always say, I'm like a LinkedIn addict, so I always say, hey, if we're not pals on LinkedIn, add me here. And then I just have a little link on the footer of every personal email that I ever send. And so that's how I build up my, you know, personal communications. But you can do the same thing with, you know, hey, want to join our newsletter list? Sign up here.
Okay. Good job. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Judith.
Well, I don't see any other questions, and since we're getting close to the end of it, I want to give you, Jason, the time to kind of give the last thoughts. The one thing that I would be interested in is the title of this is The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, which is one of my favorite films. I love Eastwood and his Man with the No Name trilogy. So I would like to hear what your good, your bad, and the ugly from this, and then if you can wrap this up.
Sure. Well, I think let's definitely do another webinar on email. Let's get some feedback from the attendees today and find out what specific piece, you know, maybe like a capital campaign or a crowdfunding campaign launch, and we can do a whole webinar just on the email strategy behind that and how often you can follow. You know, because you know a campaign is one of those times where you may email with a bit more frequency than you know your typical monthly or weekly updates. So let's definitely get another webinar on the books for that. As far as the good, and the bad, and the ugly, you know, I'm not sure if I would have a specific example of something that I would want to do for each. But I will say this, right? Email is always going to be your most effective communication tool with your entire database. And so, you know, when you think, you know, when you're only seeing that email once in your content creation section of whatever tool that you're using, you know, you're only seeing that once, you're only testing it once or twice, but it may be going out to hundreds or thousands, and I'm sure for a lot of nonprofits, tens of thousands of contacts. So, and that may be the only stewardship that they even get from your organization. So be sure that they're receiving the information that's the most important and the most relevant for that moment. So, you know, whether it's a donation, a call to donations, or it's a call to action to do something else, or it's to really you know, align your mission with your supporters and inform them of, you know, the great impact that your nonprofit is having. Just keep that in mind, right? Is that your email list is full of your best supporters and your worst supporters. So, you know, make sure that you're writing it for both.
Right.
Sorry, go ahead.
One last question, and I'll just read it out loud. It's if people read an email in the preview pane, does that count as an open?
If people read an email in the preview pane, no, it does not count as an open. Only if they click on the actual email does it count as an open.
And then lastly, if people have any questions after this, of course, we're wrapping up right now, but tweet them to the GR Office Hours hashtag, and we'll answer them after this email.
Yeah, definitely.
Gone.
Yeah, everybody, make sure you go and create. As I mentioned before, as a benefit of being a Grassroots member, you're able to get discounts on lots of different services that their affiliate partners offer, and one of those is Commit Change. So, if you're looking for a better way to collect donations online, to build your donor relationships online, or you need a donor database tool, definitely give us a call, and we'll hook you up with a discount on all of our tools as a benefit of being a Grassroots member. We have no annual contracts, no setup fees, and no donation skimming. So definitely would love to talk to you guys about that too.
We will give information out to everybody who attended if they want to check out Commit Change as a possible opportunity for their fundraising. It's a great tool. We use it, and we'll give out the information to speak to Jason directly. He had it in the beginning of the slides, and also we'll hand out, if people want the PowerPoint presentation as well to keep. We'll send that out as well. It'll take a few days for me to get through the recordings, but you can check out our previous office hours if you're interested in going back at youtube.com/grassroots.org. All that's spelled out. I'll quickly drop that out into chat so you can see everything that we've talked about. But Jason, once again, we've appreciated you jumping on board for our 7th office hours. We're excited for the next one that might be another topic of emails, because this was fantastic, and we appreciate everybody who attended and asked some amazing questions.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks a lot, Ben, and thanks a lot, everybody, for joining. I'll talk to you all soon.
Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.